Hey everyone, and welcome back to PDA Dad UK. In this episode, I am interviewing Hannah Harris, who is an actually autistic woman who has an amazing cultural background and also identifies with PDA. So we'll be talking to her about her life, her achievements, and what it's like living with neurodivergence day by day. So welcome back. Before we go on any further, can you hit subscribe, ring the bell so that you'll always know when new content's coming up. It makes a big difference to who gets to see this. Also, if you can go over, I'll put links in the description. I have merchandise now, purely for the fact that we're raising money for the PDA Society. So everything that is sold through the Redbubble channel, which will be in the description, will go directly to the PDA Society charity and the amazing work they do. So please do get on board with that. Welcome, Hannah. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good, enjoying the sunshine here.
Rub it in.
It's cold. It's sunny, but it's cold.
So, Hannah, we started talking. Obviously, you're a member of the group I run on Facebook.
Yeah.
And you reached out to me with some ideas. Now, you run your own sort of blog and advisory in yourself. What's that about?
Similar. So effectively, I'm a fully qualified teacher. I was teaching in mainstream and I taught in special, education for a little while. And I was doing a little bit of tutoring in the lockdown. And by complete, I don't think it's chance, but obviously word of mouth carried on. I ended up with a lot of neurodivergent children that I was working with through that. And ultimately what kind of came from that is parents would then ask me about what about this, and it was completely unrelated to education, as it were. They want to know about things related to food, going out, sensory challenges, all of that other information that is that impacts our ability to do everything. Learn.
Discussed nearly enough.
Yeah, not enough, and I think a lot of that comes from, and I know this when I was working in education, it was like parents would obviously go through this hugely drawn out diagnostic process, receive a diagnosis, then be discharged and said, it's okay, school will help you, but school then receive no training. So if you're somebody like me who lives and breathes it, I have neurodivergent brothers, I have siblings with learning disabilities, we are very neurodiverse, my adoptive family is very neurodiverse. I lived it. So I could say, yeah, we do this. We try this. Have we tried that? But for the majority of staff that were in contact with children, that wasn't the knowledge base that they had. So, a lot of parents would go, oh, we want some support from school. We want some support from school. And the reverse problem was the school didn't know how to support in the thing. So it was just this constant, it was like a washing machine cycle of and nothing ever came from that. And so I said, well, let me start sharing some of my experiences online. Yeah. And I genuinely did not think when I did it that anybody would see any value in it. When somebody said to me, like, you should do that because and I was like, okay. And then people were like, yes, wow, I get this. This has made a difference. And as far as I was concerned, I was just talking like, I'm going here and I'm going to the supermarket and I take this with me and I take that with me and I do this before and I do this after. I didn't think it was going to be like revolutionary information to people. Yeah. And when I realized the impact that it made for people, I was like, okay, I need to do this. This is like my new life. So I continued teaching for a period of time. And now this is my full-time gig. And I support families. I work with charities and organizations as well, because what people are coming to realize is that the voices of autistic and neurodivergent people have a space. It's not perfect yet, but they're recognizing that we have something valid to say. And I know from my experiences, with social care and all that kind of thing, it was kind of like for a while, it was like, oh, well, this opinion's not valid because this person is like too disabled to function. So we're not interested in this opinion. And now there is a tide and everything takes time. I'm currently working with an East Midlands based charity creating an adult autism membership area where there is activities, there's personal development things, there's support in all facets of ways for non-learning disabled adults, because they have no offering, which you think in 2022, you'd think that would be a thing, but it isn't.
We're in a world that is always playing catch up, I'm afraid. And it sucks because there's so much that could be being done that isn't. And like you say, it's catching up, but there's a long way to go. And I think voices like yourself, it's why I spend a lot of time on this channel interviewing autistic people, because I know myself, I'm not a neurodivergent, I'm a neurotypical. But for me, the conversations I have with people like yourself make such a difference, because if I'm to understand my daughter from the inside, which I'm never going to be able to do fully, but if I'm going to get as close to that as possible, the voices of autistic people and the advice that I get from autistic people is so much more relevant, because it's from the inside of the box, and it makes such a difference.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we were talking, obviously, before we started recording, but we were talking about your cultural heritage and stuff like that.
Yeah.
What was it like for you growing up, being neurodivergent, but, you know, maybe not knowing or not having the diagnosis? I don't know how it works.
Yeah, I was completely unaware. So I didn't receive any diagnoses until I'd spent a brief period of time in the care system, and then went to an unofficially adoptive family. And it was there in their neurodivergence that they kind of spent 10 minutes with me and was like, do you realize that this explains a lot of the challenges that you experience? Prior to that, you know, I lived in from the East Midlands, so right bang in the middle, in the greenery. I'd lived there my whole life. My dad had come from St Kitts and Nevis around Windrush time, so my dad had me at 47, and I'm 26 now, so, you know, if he was still with us, he would be sort of in his 70s. When his parents came over to seek work, when they put the call out for people from the Commonwealth to come over, he actually remained in St Kitts and Nevis with a family sort of friend, and that was harsh. Like, I've seen the pictures. He literally lived in a tin hut with four of his brothers. You know, you don't think when you see those things and you think, nah, that's not really how it is. And he never spoke about that. Never spoke about it. I only found that out after he passed away. I found that information out. So, you know, he had quite a harsh experience of life as a young child, because he came over to England and by the time he was like 8. And we were talking, like we were saying earlier, you know, it's very hard sometimes to complain or, you know, about something that is maybe perceived as hidden, or, you know, even, you know, in culture, we find that when someone is anxious, when someone struggles with depression or mental health or something you can't necessarily see, everybody can often want to kind of call it out and call bull on it. And like I was saying to you, how do you discuss anxiety as a real deep concern when your ancestors were shoved on a ship and used for slavery? You know, we have a historical ancestry of being tough and a struggle. So, you know, the struggle is almost expected. And, you know, there's still, as we've seen, you know, with the Black Lives Matter movements, there's still that element of struggles just to be, you know, diverse in culture. Never mind if you're a neurodiverse as well as.
One of the things that I find, I talk about it a lot, but it's that whole aspect there of, we've got neurodiversity in blend with cultural diversity that comes, and it's so frustrating to me that ableism, if you like. So, you know, we've not overcome racism, but it's certainly a lot better than it was, and, you know, long way to go. But there is, you know, most people, the same people of the world, except that diversity is important. Cultural diversity is a really important facet of our society. It's who we are as Britain, as the United Kingdom. We are a multicultural society, you know, and I come from Australia, which is very strong on the multicultural society side of things. They wear it like a badge of honor. Yeah. We've got that. You know, you mentioned the LGBTQ plus community, and that, you know, the acceptance that's there now in a way that it wasn't, you know, even 10, 15, 20 years ago. But ableism and, you know, physical and mental disabilities just come bottom rung.
And it's not on the agenda. It's not on the agenda. We go into I'm part of an activist group that is basically out to smash the stigma around learning disabled and autistic people, and we've recently been going into schools and discussing hate crime and against learning disabled and autistic people with secondary school age children. And as we were talking about, as a protected group, it really is the bottom level it's like an expectation that like nobody's even talking about it. Like we talk about hate crime against Black, BAME, you know, ethnic minorities. We talk about it against LGBTQAI, and we're not saying it's perfect, but it's not even on the agenda.
A minister of health, a minister of disability, who hasn't spent a day in a wheelchair, hasn't spent a day understanding the neurodivergence in that way. How can they be making these decisions if they haven't lived the life at some level?
And ultimately, ableism drives all that, doesn't it? To be a minister of health, you have to have gone through the standard, if not higher levels of education, potentially private education. You have had to mold to fit that system. You've got to have the communication style that enables you to stand up in Parliament and deliver in the way in which everybody has decided that is the way. It's not open to people. And it's not saying that somebody that's neurodiverse couldn't do that. It just doesn't allow for any form of diversity, none at all. Like you look around Parliament, it doesn't represent the UK.
Not at all. I mean, it's I say this coming from the Grumpy Gits, which is 4 white middle class blokes all sitting around having a chat. But the reality is, it's a white boys club in so many ways, and it's a neurotypical white boys club within that. And I mean, I think that's why voices like yours, the stuff that we're doing online, and the approaches that are coming out and people speaking up. YouTube's been a big thing, and I think podcasts have been a big thing for people to be able to start highlighting these areas of society that aren't necessarily, we call them, cultural minorities in whatever format, but they're actually not a minority. Yeah. The amount of the group I run on Facebook, we're about to hit 40,000 members, and that's a UK-based group. Now, that's 40,000 parents in the UK who have got neurodivergence themselves, have autistic kids, have ADHD kids, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
This impacts a lot more people than is realised. It's been, I would call, a silent cultural group, not a vocal cultural group.
Yeah.
And I think it's things like this that really do start to change that. One of the things that we discussed coming into this was that you obviously identify with PDA as being part of your neurodivergence.
Yeah.
How is that living? We talk a lot about what we see with kids and the difficulties that I see it in my daughter, the difficulties that she faces and the anxiety. What's it like living as an adult with PDA? Because we don't hear about that much.
It's a difficult one to kind of explain to people, because as we discuss about culture all the time, for me found, obviously I was diagnosed late, so I had to kind of in ways look for where my life was affected, because it had been the way I'd known it for so long. I just thought, this is just the way I live. And especially, in relation to some of the difficulties that I have around, being autistic, being neurodivergent, and having those PDA, that sort of PDA profile, is I thought I was really bad. I thought I was a really bad person. So for me, I am quite a controlling person. I find the way that I manage anxiety is I take control of everything I can take control of. And I don't necessarily do it in a way that is really in your face. But if there's an opportunity to lead something, I'm there leading it. I can then control the pace. I can control the conversation. I can control the sensory environment. So all of the things that I find challenging, I'm very intelligent. So I can almost, and I use the word manipulation not in a negative way, because for me, manipulation is me trying to support myself to manage what is going on. I'm not sat there scheming, thinking, how can I be a person? Like,
Mr. Burns.
Yeah, literally.
Everything is coming together.
We manipulate everything. We manipulate children. If you do this, put a sticker on that chart, then I'll give you a chocolate bar. That's manipulation. Don't tell me it's any different. And for me, I have to take things and try and manipulate those as much as I can, and that's probably the biggest way I manage my anxiety. But I would say the biggest probably challenge for me as somebody with PDA is, I call it the PDA cycle that I get stuck in. So it's like I have something that I know I need to do, and maybe I even want to do it, And then that creates me anxiety. And then I know that I should be doing it, but I can't. Like I just can't take the step. It feels too big. You know, a task like putting on your shoes or getting out the house, you know, to get out the house, I have to get the things that I need to get ready, get them in the bag, get my shoes on, put my coat on. And, you know, even those things like putting on shoes is a multi-step process.
It's a series of demands, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just, we think of it as put on your shoes, one singular demand, but it's not. It's get your shoes out of the cupboard. It's get them on your feet. It's do up your laces.
Yeah, I've still got to stop what I was doing first.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where I get kind of stuck. And then I get frustrated and anxious because I know I need to do the thing and maybe I want to do the thing and maybe I'm going to be late, but I can't. But I want to, but I can't. And that cycle, so anxiety provoking. And as somebody that lives on their own, that's just a demand that I've put on myself.
Yeah.
So you think of young people who have demands on them constantly. You know, I always say to parents that I work with, think about how much potential your child has to control anything in their life. It's quite limited in general. For the typical upbringing, they don't eat when they want, they don't sleep when they want, they don't go places when they want, they don't get changed just when they want. You know,
they have to go to school, they have to do certain lessons, they have to eat. I mean, it's those things. I think we forget how many demands there are in life. You have to eat, you have to go shopping, you have to do those things. But for somebody who's living with PDA as the
demand your own body puts on you. My mouth is dry, so I need to get water. That is the demand, and that is really hard for some people to just get over it. Like it's not that. It can take 30 minutes to an hour and a half for me to get to the point where I'm actually going to go and get the drink.
I was speaking to Laura McConnell, who is a teacher in Scotland who is a PDAer as well. And she spoke about the fact that she's got 3 or 4 supermarkets within 5 minutes walk from her house, but she still gets home delivery because it's one less demand. And it's just an easier way to control things. We don't think about those as being demands. They're just things we do.
And there's things like that I can't remove all demands from myself. For me, it's like a training muscle. Like if I take it all away, because sometimes people say, well, let's just not do. When we take it all away, that makes me anxious because there's things that I know I need to do. And then when it all comes back, it's too much. So I have to move it like a sliding scale. So like when my energy to cope with things is really high, I can do those things like getting a drink, going to the toilet, all the things that your body just does are seamless. I don't find it as difficult. As the day goes on, or as, you know, things have happened throughout the day and the energy goes down. So towards the evening, I have a very low sort of demand environment. I make sure that I cook too much when I eat first thing so that I don't have to do any cooking in the evening. So I just manage and mold that around my life. Like tonight, I've got to go and coach football. I coach for a disability team that I play for as well. But after tonight, it'll be home. It will be a repeated TV program or a film, and I will just eat whatever, you know, because even down to the food that I eat, it's like if I don't want that I've got to go through a process to deal with that. And actually, I need to pick my battle, because do I want to sleep tonight and eat something, or do I want to create that cycle and then not achieve anything and just be really anxious? And that won't set me up well for the next day. So I have to be quite aware of how many things I set myself up to do a day. So I'm going to speak to you now. I've got a phone call with a medical professional, and then I'm in the sun. That's 2 lots of quite big level communication. So I'm going to take the pressure down. Then I'm going to coach. Then I'm going to take it down again. So it's about balancing like those days and myself.
So what I'm hearing and seeing from what you've been saying there is, so one of the things I often wonder about for my daughter as she battles this stuff, her abilities to cope now are at the level of an 11-year-old, because that's what she is.
Yeah.
I sense that over time, as you've grown into adulthood, and as you developed as a human being, as a person, you started to learn your own self-regulation techniques that allow you to cope with the PDA side of life and the neurodivergent side of life.
Yeah.
In order to be able to function. Would that be right?
Yeah, and I've had to make decisions that wouldn't necessarily, that on paper, when I thought about, I didn't want to do, but actually made a big difference to my life. So I have 8 younger brothers and sisters. We all lived at home. I loved my brothers and sisters, and I loved being around my family in theory. But when I look back to the way that I used to function and how my mood used to change and the levels of meltdowns or the shutdowns that I used to have, where I couldn't actually enjoy being around them because I was coping being around them. When I moved out, which was during the lockdown period, which is probably not coincidental when I think about it now, when I go to see them, I really enjoy them. And I can be really interactive with them because I go there on my own terms. I dip in and out. I've had my time to charge before I leave. And then when I get back, I'm in control. Everything here I'm in control of. I control the smell. I control everything, anything, absolutely everything, the heat, everything. But, being a young child, they don't even control what they eat for dinner.
No.
Imagine if you came home from a day at work or a day out and you would like, yes, I'm just going to have tea and biscuits for my dinner. It's a nice piece of cake. It's going to be great. And you come back and someone poses you with a bowl of vegetables and says, you're not having that cake, you're having that.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have it, would you? You wouldn't have it.
Fuck off. I'm quite.
Yeah, literally. Where's my fucking cake? Yes, we've got to eat good food, and we should encourage that. And I'm not for 1 minute saying, take everything away, give them what they want. It's timing. It's timing and thinking, if your child is a person that really is drained by school, because that was me, although I was highly academic, loved school, loved learning, it drained me. It really
because
did.
You're masking, I'm guessing, that whole time.
Yeah.
You're probably masking in order to cope. And then you get home and it is like that Coke bottle effect. It's all coming out. That's when you got your shutdowns, your meltdowns, whatever.
Yeah. For me, I used a lot of my energy because I wanted to focus and I wanted to be in those lessons and I wanted to learn. But naturally, I'm very fidgety and I didn't like to sit. So a lot of my energy was keeping my bum on a seat.
Yeah.
And so by the time I'd finished the school day, I was exhausted. So, I needed to be outside. I needed anything but a bowl of green vegetables. 3 hours later, after I'd been for a run, watched a familiar program, had a bath, feed me whatever you want.
Yeah.
But immediately after, you couldn't do anything with me. If we went to the supermarket after school instead of going straight home, that would have been a massive problem. So, but it wasn't that I couldn't do supermarket. It was just not then. Not then. That wasn't the best.
That's such an insight because it's something that, I'm listening to that and I'm thinking about my daughter. And we've had meal times have been an issue because it is relatively close to when she gets home from school. But we've learned to, I tend to, as much as I can, let her pick what she wants for tea in the period with an understanding that we do need to make it kind of healthy. So what's going to go in there but in the end, and it was something that one of the workers that we had a while back said is that in the end, if she's eating, it's good. So if she just wants a bowl of cereal, as long as she's eating, that's fine because you'll find that she will make it up in other ways, like you're saying. Yeah. It's giving it that time for her to calm down. So for me, that's a real insight because it's really true and making me think about what can I be doing to make it easier for her.
Yeah, I mean, my mum would always make dinner and the question was always, because she knew what everybody liked anyway, do you want it now or do you want me to plate it up? There was never a pressure to sit and eat immediately because sometimes the noise was too much for people. Some of them, and where they ate was irrelevant as long as the plate came back. So that was the way that they'd always managed it. And like I said, if it got to 8 o'clock at night and they'd not eaten, then it was like, are we eating this or are we eating cereal? Because something had to be eaten. But 90% of the time, they would have made that decision themselves. Yeah. And it was less for her because she could have made herself really wound up trying to get everybody to eat, get everybody sat down. And I think that sometimes we have to take a breath And I always say to, and I learned this when I was working at a specialist school. It was an autism only specialist school. We used to have to ask the question, what does it matter if? So what does it matter if they eat their dinner at 7 or they eat it at 5? What does it matter?
Wow. That's...
Because it makes you stop, doesn't it?
I love that I still get these moments where my mind's kind of blown, because it's such a simple thing, but it's something that it's so easy to bring into just taking a step back for a second and what does this matter if? I love that.
We get in the rat race, don't we? They're not brush their teeth. They're not brush their teeth. Okay, what does it matter if they don't brush them this morning? What does it matter if they brush them when they get home from school? I used to have a family friend whose kid loved brushing her teeth. It was her best thing ever. Would she always do it in the morning? No, really groggy, really struggled to get going because she had to dress and do all those things that she found hard. After school, she'd be there for half an hour brushing those teeth. What does it matter?
That's such a magic,
isn't it?
And that's just it. And this is what I find. And neurodivergence is all about this. It's simply a different perspective on things.
Yeah.
And sometimes for myself, and I love this as a neurotypical, I can take on board something like that, listen to it, and it is just making that shift in my own perspective because it can match with what my daughter experiences. Yeah. And it makes such a difference in the world when we can do that. And I think that's what happens in, take it away from neurodivergence and, learning disabilities or anything like that. Simply understanding other people. We talk about it, walk a mile in someone's shoes. We'll just walk a few steps. If you can put yourself in their position for just that moment, it can bring on such a different way of perceiving it, and it enhances it. We're better as a society as the sum of our parts. We are so much stronger as the sum of our parts than we are walking separately and alone. And I think, it's magic.
Yeah.
I want to ask about, so you became a teacher.
Yeah.
And you said you're very academic. You love learning. It was a big part of what you did.
Hated university, but love learning.
Oh, okay.
University was the period where my neurodivergence came to really, everything kind of came out. I'd been at the same secondary school since I was 11 till I was 18. And then obviously university, there's a big step up in independent learning. There's a big step up in just general independence, getting to places at the right time, living in halls, which I didn't end up really living in halls because I was just to and fro back from home. The social aspect was like nothing I'd ever seen, because I think for a lot of young people, they've been at home, they've had this really sheltered life experience in their little towns, they come out, they're living alone, there's this a huge pressure to be everything, to be drinking, to be out, and I could not mask up to that level. So academically, I caught up just as I would with any academic sort of standards, like, this is new. Okay, I get it now. I get the way this goes, and I'll do that. But it was very difficult. But also was the best support I'd ever had for any difficulty. So I had a diagnosis of dyslexia, and at university actually were the first people they did like a diagnosis of autism before I had mine through the NHS. So the support that I got from them was the best support I've ever had in my life. It was just the living at university. And
but that's what I love is that you took that, and I mean, you became a teacher, and it's something I think is, I talk about it a lot, about probably the disability community in general. I've said it a few times. I liken it to Hogwarts. It exists in the background, and no one's really aware of it until you need it, and then suddenly you realise this thing's been bubbling away under the surface all that time. It's always been there. And I find that with the people who are involved in the community, 99% of the time, you'd expect them to become quite selfish and inward people. But the opposite occurs. These are the people who do start things like becoming teachers, helping others, setting up groups, setting up support things. There's this innate desire to, I think because of what we've all experienced, whether it's the shit fight that's trying to get diagnosis in this country at the moment, whether it's the difficulties of just living day to day and finding that other person that understands Oh, we've been there. We know. Trust us.
Oh yeah, and that's the best thing that comes from, like, the laughs. It's better. It's laughing with somebody, because when you're on your own, it's miserable. But you know, I went away for the weekend and left the fridge wide open. The fridge was full of snow. I laugh about that. You know, it's really easy to be like 10:30 at night. I'm defrosting the fridge. I'm defrosting the fridge, and I'm nasty, and I've had this weekend away. But you find that love and connection between each other. So it doesn't seem so just desolate and like you were saying, that's hopeless.
Isolating. You feel so isolated as a human being, because you don't think anybody else understands until you go through that magic wall and you end up in Hogwarts and you suddenly realize, oh, this is what I've been waiting for all this time. This is where my people are. This is my tribe, if you like.
Yes, you know? Your tribe's so important.
Yeah.
And it's taken me a long time to find that, because for some, you know, for a lot of the time it was like, especially in teaching, you're not autistic, you're far too intelligent. You know, you can't be a teacher and be autistic. How can you drive and be autistic? You know, that was I faced from others that looked at me working, and from people within the places that I worked. Yeah. And I initially, it made me very inward. I didn't tell people that I was autistic. I didn't diagnose it to my first workplace. I was like, well, they're not going to want to employ me because they're going to think I'm either useless, or they're going to want to baby me, or they're not going to want to hire me. I really genuinely thought that. And I didn't tell people until I was actually I was head of year 11. So I was responsible for the school's like examination stage young people and effectively their results. And it wasn't until I felt that I had to be established before I could be that vulnerable, because I had a real issue with vulnerability at that stage, because I was very much like, nothing's going to stop me, and I'm going to do everything in spite of everything, which is a great mentality, but B, can run you into the ground very quickly. And again, very lonely and very isolating, because people can't understand you and help you, because people don't know that. And it kind of swings. You can't talk about it if you've never talked about it. It was a big shock. And some of my best friends that I used to work with there were people that asked me questions like that, who now sit and will have very informed discussions about neurodiversity, being neurotypical. They teach child development. So to their children with child development, they teach a very broad understanding rather than what is just in this microsection of a book. And they bring that to the students that they teach, and they teach others in their area and field.
I'll ask you this directly, because it's a question that comes up a lot, or a point that a lot of people make to me. But when you went through your university course to become a teacher, how much time was focused on understanding neurodiversity?
I did my teacher training 2016, 2017. So that academic year, that was the first year that special educational needs was included in teacher training. Wow. Any form of input information was included in teacher training for the first time. And what we did in that was we went on what they call a pupil pursuit. So you choose one special needs child and you go with them around the school for the day.
So it was like a day.
One day. Now, I did a skit program. So we did what they said was SEN enhanced. And as part of that, we went to a special school for 2 days and we had to write one additional paper. That is it. When I was in the mainstream school, I did not do one piece of training on neurodivergency at all. Not dyslexia, dyspraxia, nothing, nada, zip, nothing.
See, that's something that just needs to change, doesn't it?
That was a school that had a 90 student nurture group and had more children, like 50 something children with EHCPs. So that is quite a progressive stream school, and there was nothing.
That's astonishing, isn't it? And it's so sad that we're still in this position, that it's just not taught. And I think if we could look, I think there should be focus on the amazing achievements of neurodivergent people, of autistic human beings, especially in that realm. I think
ultimately it's top down. If the head teacher doesn't see the value in it, amongst all the other things that a head teacher has to value, then it's not done.
No,
it's not done. And even when it is done, It's very rarely done very broadly. It's kind of straight out the textbook, the old classic information. There wouldn't be anybody that would reflect your daughter or myself. It would be Hans Asperger's straight out the book, or, classic autism straight out the book.
We'll talk about levels of autism. We'll talk about these things. And of course, girls don't get autism.
No.
As it get autism,
you don't get it.
Batch. But that whole thing of, again, something I really wanted to talk to you about from that perspective, because historically, it's only in recent, the last decade really, that it's really come to an understanding of how the level of which you can have autistic females.
Yeah.
And, as a gender, it was always, autism was very male bias as far as its understanding. But now there's, we're uncovering more and more and understanding masking and the level to which girls would mask over boys. Not to say that boys don't mask, but there is a much higher. How you're fascinating in the perspective from a purely observational perspective. You're from a diverse cultural background. You're from a diverse neurodivergent background. You're also a woman living in the world.
I'm an equality and diversity for monitoring as dream.
Yeah.
Absolute dream.
You're getting a job at the BBC in seconds.
Oh, no. Sign her up.
What has it been like kind of riding that wave? Like, obviously you've received a diagnosis and an understanding at a time where it's just becoming more understood. How's it been for you?
I think for me, to start with, I felt really like out of sorts, because I didn't really felt like I fell in either camp. I felt like I identified with some of the classic things, but then I also really identified with that high anxiety. Growing up, I would have never felt that I was like highly anxious. But when I look back now, that perfectionism, and that is, PDA, quite
that
common.
whole thing, you talked about that need for control.
Yes.
And that's like PDA, first box ticked. The umbrella of PDA, from me, my understanding of it is that anxiety, the need for control, because it helps to manage that anxiety at a subconscious level.
Yeah. And that perfectionism, like I had to get A's or nothing, such a high level. And for me, school masked a lot. My special interest as an autistic person is learning. If I find something interesting, I will learn it.
Well, I did a video very recently on dopamine and its role within, and especially with ADHD, which I'm guessing you've got from things you've spoken about. But that whole thing of dopamine is that for a lot of neurodivergent mind, it's that the dopamine isn't produced in the right level. It's not being produced enough until you find that thing. So I spoke with a good friend who was my best man, but we spoke about on the Grumpy Gitch channel. We spoke to him about his, being diagnosed with ADHD. But he's a fantastic musician, and he talked to me about it. And I asked him, I said, do you think your ADHD, the hyper focus that comes from that, do you think that's the reason you're such a good musician? And his answer, and it will stick with me forever, it's the reason I'm a good musician. It's also the reason I'm not a great musician.
Yeah.
Because the dopamine can only sustain itself for so long.
Yes.
Before we move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that learning thing. He's a teacher as well.
Yeah. And I did. I can remember going to a training once about something called flow states. And it was like, they say where challenge meets, difficulty meets something. I can't remember. There's something else. You get flow. And when you're in there, you can stay in there for ages. It's like full on dopamine, like release. And that stuck with me, because I was like, if I can get every kid to feel that, then you know what you're feeling for. So you have to make the challenge and the difficulty match. And for some children, that might be just here in the graph, For others, they may need a real high level of challenge, flow. And once you're in that's the state where you're in forever, and time seems to pass and pass. For some of us, it's science on the field, in the mud, looking for worms. That's flow state. For others, it's the spelling tests. because that's whatever they find flowing. But you're looking for flow and trying to stay in that state of flow forever.
That just makes so much sense. It's funny because I can relate to this stuff myself. Do you remember the days? There was a game back in the sort of 90s. There was a game called Doom.
No.
It was like it was the first person shooter perspective thing. Mm-hmm. You sort of went around killing monsters and stuff like that. My mate had it on his computer, and we used to go. But there was a thing on there called God mode,
mm-hmm.
and you could type in a code, and you were impervious. You could just walk around, and he couldn't understand why I enjoyed playing it. So there's no challenge until he sat and watched me once, and it's because I was just so chill, walking around in this maze thing, shooting things like.
Yeah.
You know, it's
like when Darth Vader comes into the
like, but that's that flow. What you're talking about, it wasn't a high level of difficulty, but it was just entertaining.
Yes.
And it's finding that, but sometimes it's the challenge of finding something. I tell this to my son when he's playing his PlayStation, he's playing Spider-Man. It gets too difficult for him. He wants to give up, and it's like, push with it because you can do it. Yeah. But it's finding that level of difficulty and setting the difficulty levels right so that he can continue whilst being challenged. I love that. Makes so much.
And it's perceived level. It's a perception again. You may look at a young person and think, well, they're so intelligent, so let's bang the difficulty level up. Well, actually, the difficulty may now mean that the challenge level is so high. You know, for my young people that I would have considered to have a PDA profile, whether that was diagnosed or not, and a lot of the strategies I would use is the same. Some need a really high level of success, and the level of challenge has to go up almost horizontally. It's that sort of, you know, it can't be like this. Whereas some you can like yes, right, let's do it. You know, and that's what all you've done is increase so much anxiety that you shut down, and then you get behaviors, and then the focus goes on behaviors as opposed to like, okay, let's just take it off and we'll practice again.
I've spoken about this before, and it's something you don't hear spoken about a lot in this arena, but I think it's really relevant. And that is the 5 love languages. So I don't know if you've come across this, but it's actually a Christian book. It's about love languages, but I think it applies in life in general, in any relationship. It's supposed to be a sort of relation, husband-wife relation type thing, and it's learning each other's love languages, because we all have different love languages.
Yeah.
And I spoke about this because I think that sometimes when we're doing that thing of the reward, like you're talking about that, and they need to feel that success. How we deliver that success is often not in their love language. So for me, my primary love language is words of affirmation.
Mm-hmm.
So I need to hear, you're doing a great job, mate. Well done. I need to hear that. And that's how I interpret my love language. For my mother-in-law, she's a gift giver.
Yes.
So I can say to her all the time, oh, you're doing a great job with that. I've seen you do some really great stuff. That's fantastic. It doesn't make a difference. If I was to buy a bunch of flowers and say thank you, it made a huge difference. She'll receive that in a completely different way.
Yeah.
Learning the love language of the person that we're dealing with, our child, helps those situations, because that is where that encouragement can come from, and that sets the dopamine off.
Yeah. I mean, I would do something that was probably would never have admitted to senior leaders that I would do this, but I would read the bare minimum information I would get on a child.
Yeah.
I would take every single child, neurodiverse, neurotypical, like a blank piece of paper. And as I work with them, they fill the paper. They are who they are. I just take them as who they are. And I always say to people that I start to work with, if you're getting in your head too much, it loses authenticity. Mm. You get bogged down in that, well, this is what I should be doing. This is what I should be doing. And I should be putting this routine here. And they should have this bedtime for 7 o'clock. And we're teaching, and I should be using this overlay and that. Breathe. Let them fill the paper. Do something and then see how it goes. And if it doesn't quite work and you don't get the response, then you scale it. You do something different. And it's the same with, I was fine with children who I knew would masked. I didn't see one iota of it. I can hand on my heart say that. But if a parent said to me, this is what would happen, I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to try this at the end of the day. Tell me if it makes any difference. I accepted that I may not see the difference, But and it didn't need to be an overt gesture. It might be, I'm going to let them read their book for 10 minutes that I know that they really enjoy while I pack everything away and everybody else packs everything away. You know, it might be sending them to the toilet for, you know, so they can go to the toilet, have a drink, and then I send them home. Nothing heaven and earth. I'm not asking for massive resources or huge time commitments or a teaching assistant. I'm just seeing them, seeing me, connecting together.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, you know, we spoke to Marie Gensels, who did the Don't Exclude Me series on BBC.
Yeah.
That was eye-opening for me because it was interesting hearing her perspective on that, because she's actually quite focused on that stuff. Never came out in the TV show, which is why we talked. But it is that thing. And I think when you come with that blank sheet of paper, you're avoiding the self-fulfilling prophecies that we often put in place.
Yeah.
You know, the expectation of someone to fail, they're going to fail. What I want to ask now is, when we look at, you know, the people who watch this channel probably primarily are carers and parents who are struggling to, you know, see or looking for ways that they can make their kids' lives better.
Yeah. Going
to your upbringing and everything that you went through, if you were to give one piece of advice to a parent, and obviously everyone's different, but a generic piece of advice that you think would speak to everybody that was so important for you, what would that piece of advice be? Don't
put shackles on things. Be open. Be open to have conversations, because when I was young, I couldn't go to my parents and say, this was how I feel. I feel different, and I feel, you know, it makes me feel this way. And I carried a lot of that anxiety and worries and resultant trauma into adulthood, and then had to deal with it. Celebrate them for them. Take them as who they are. Don't look left and don't look right at everybody else. Do what you're doing and ask yourself that question: what does it matter if? And be ambitious. Be ambitious and just be okay being on your own time trajectory, because there's no set time limit. But just ask yourself that question: what does it matter if they want to wear shorts all year round? What does it matter if they still want to watch Paw Patrol when they're 12 years old? If they are happy and they are content and they understand and love themselves as the unique individual that they are, everything else will come.
Love it. That is, and I think that's going to be the piece of advice I'm going to say to take away, is that, what does it matter if? I think that is the question we should all be asking. Hannah, I want to thank you so much. This has been absolutely fascinating for me.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're so welcome. And we're going to have to do it again. Anyone who's watching, if they want to catch up on your channel and find you on social media, where can they do so?
On Instagram, if you just follow @the Autistic Advantage, or they can add just me on Facebook, and just go from there. Just Hannah Harris.
We will put links in the description, and you can follow those to get through to all that. Again, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's been a great morning.
It's been great. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. Please do go hit like, hit subscribe, ring the bell. You'll always know when we've got new content coming up like this, these fascinating interviews and these insights into another part of the world we don't get to see nearly enough. Please do go check out the store, and remember, every penny that's made from the sale of merchandise is going directly to the PDA Society, so please get on that. I will see you again on the next episode, but in the meantime, please stay safe.